Hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning online as well. I think we're ready to start. I have to get used to this mic a little bit. I hope you can hear me just well online. Um, we have a great lineup for you. Very happy to welcome you all. My name is Tim. I work for Ground Truth Solution, and I'm going to be the facilitator of this discussion. We have with us three panelists joining us online, and we have Talatu here next to me, who completes the panel. We also have Meg with us. And Meg, I think I would give you the floor right away to maybe give a few words on the title, what this is about, and why we decided to have this session.
Thank you so much, Tim, and thanks for everyone for joining us. It's great to see a full room of people, which maybe is the benefit of being on the first day, not sure. But it's great to have you with us, and hopefully we'll have an interesting chat. Also nice to see so many people online, so we can say that our first adventure in Teams webinars has worked out okay. My name is Meg Sattler, and I'm the Chief Executive of Ground Truth Solutions. For those who don't know us, in a nutshell, we're a small organisation who works with a lot of different local organisations to try and unearth different people's perceptions of how aid is received in places where there's a large humanitarian response. We've also recently started delving into climate change adaptation with the same sort of ethos. So we work with a combination of research and advocacy to find out what people think about humanitarian assistance, how they experience it, which in some ways is the easy part, and the more difficult part is the advocacy part, where we work a lot at various levels to try and influence change based on people's perceptions. And where this session came from was Ground Truth has had a fairly unique and consistent, I would say, experience over the past many years, where we're an organisation that was set up as a tool for aid reform. And so we talk to people about their experiences, they share their views, but increasingly they also share their ideas and their capacities on how things might be better. We find out things like how aid can be more influenced by micro-level priorities instead of macro ones, whether people need more cash, how they can get it, what are the blockages to recovery, maybe sometimes they're about governance or land tenure issues, who could be part of the solutions, is aid irrelevant because it's designed in capitals and not where it should be designed, how can decision making get closer to communities, and then if it does, how can that be backed by the proper financial systems that could support those power shifts? So we come away with all these amazing ideas and sort of collective challenges, and we tell people about it and we get all excited about it, and they say, well, that's really interesting, but we can set up an AAP mechanism. And we sort of feel like our work has been taken and used as a way to sort of perpetuate what is essentially a status quo that doesn't work. It feels often like we don't discuss all of the complex information that we already have at hand, and instead we spend a lot of time thinking about what new mechanisms we can set up. And it feels a lot like a big distraction. Like often participation is not there to influence change, but there to sort of look as though we're influencing change. And I think the second thing that we come across a lot is this process of aid actors marking their own homework, which is a term that I took from a colleague about 6 years ago. But there aren't a lot of other sectors that can completely control their own narrative in the same way that the humanitarian system does. It's like when Shell says they're protecting the environment. There's a lot of people who jump in and say they're not, and that narrative is not controlled by them. There are academia, media, lobby groups, Indigenous groups who have a lot to lose from greenwashing, and the humanitarian sector is really not that different. We all sort of proudly get together at HNPW and talk about our mechanisms, but who is really holding the sector accountable from the outside, and how can more of that happen at the community level? One of the reasons it doesn't is because the system that we've kind of created is so opaque and so confusing that it's very difficult for people to comment on it. And at some point that stops feeling sort of well-intentioned, it feels a little bit sinister. And I guess the final thing which touches on the title and the reference to poly-crises is all these silos that we have. And the silos that we have are not sufficient anymore. People are facing so many intersecting crises every day, and if they're not facing crises, they're facing risks, whether they're financial ones, climate ones, conflict ones. I think at some point it's not ethical to keep treating people as though they're simply people affected by crisis who need a response. The question needs to be, how do people have the capacity to withstand what's coming for them and us as the years progress? And so humanitarian exceptionalism can no longer be the norm. We did a lot of work on Gaza recently, which taught us that this kind of redundant annual needs analysis and response cycle is so insufficient because people's needs change by the hour, and people are for the most part resourceful. So how do you sort of allow for that hourly decision making to be better and for that person to take charge of that instead of focusing on quite dated systems of coordination, needs and response? So that all just to say, you'll hear a lot of things from GTS about how we're a bit sick of hearing about AAP mechanisms, but we're also a bit sick of people being ignored. So what we wanted to do today was to bring together some different thinkers, doers, disruptors, who will talk a little bit about how to do things a little bit differently. So welcome again, and I will stop there and hand back over to Tim to facilitate what will be a very interesting panel.
Thank you so much, Meg. And great possible transition to the disruptors that you just mentioned. And I'm very happy that I can introduce them. We have Caroline Teti joining us online and joining us from Nairobi. She has a decade of experience in the aid sector, be it the development sector or the humanitarian sector, worked in different clusters, be it from health to WASH, and then decided a few years ago that probably cash is the best effective and dignified way of doing aid properly. She's been there for 8 years now. She's now the vice president of Give Directly, and she's been involved in groundbreaking studies on cash and also in pilot programs. So great to have you, Caroline. Joining us also from Nairobi is Suleiman Abdullahi. Welcome you, Suleiman. Also an experienced aid worker. He was with the NEAR network for a while, until recently, if I'm not mistaken, until the end of last year, and then decided to found his own organization. Has always been at the intersection of the private sector and the aid sector, and founded Common Reserve, which is focusing on innovative finance, a new banking and finance platform for the aid system, and we will definitely hear more about it. So warm welcome to you as well, Suleiman. Joining us online as well from Gaziantep is Leila Hasso. Leila Hasso is the current AAP advisor to the Deputy Regional Humanitarian Coordinator for Northwest Syria. She has been part of the Syrian response for a while now, have been a member of the HURAS network before joining OCHA as the AAP advisor, and so has a lot of experience specifically on community engagement. So thank you so much for joining, Leila. Looking forward to our discussion. And finally, on the right side next to me, Talatu. Talatu is research lead at FACT Foundation, has been with FACT Foundation. Well, you started as an enumerator, so you've done all the different levels to now lead research projects. You're also the leader of a few projects that we've done together, GTS and FACT Foundation in Nigeria, focusing also on cash specifically. So your research focus is on AAP, on protection, and on community engagement. So yeah, very much looking forward to also have the discussion with you, Talatu. And so maybe let me start with you, and let me really start with the community level when we talk about participation washing. In all the research that you have been involved, you have had to engage with communities, and you have heard for now a decade what these communities, notably in the Bay Area, Nigeria, Bay States, pardon, have said isn't working properly. So I wonder if there's something that you have seen if you have to, talk about emerging trends in the past 10 years when talking to communities. What did they tell you? What have you observed on what is not working well when humanitarians are trying to engage and to make sure that participation is genuine?
Well, team, thank you very much. That's a really broad question. As he mentioned, I started out as an enumerator, so it kind of like gives me a broad perspective as to how to engage with the communities at a first-hand basis, right? And it also gives me the experience that I need to equip my current enumerators on how best that they can get the real life responses that the community members want us, the humanitarians, to hear. What I have noticed is that at the beginning of the crisis, we got a lot of demands for food, for health, for water, basic necessities. But as the years go on and as the conflict situation in the BAY states kind of like changes, becoming more normal, becoming us going back to some sense of normality, there's an increased call for more sustainable ways of aid distribution or implementation. People are now wanting to be able to take control of their own lives. Okay, yes, you want to give us aid. Yes, you want to give us on a monthly basis. But then we also want a situation where if that aid comes, it comes along with you giving us the ability to sustain what you're giving us so that we have full control of how we can change our circumstances from being survivors or victims to a more capacity, a more empowered capacity for us to be able to make our decisions, for us to be able to make, a transition from constantly depending on you to wanting. So, for instance, in a situation where I've been in a community to do like a protection assessment, right? We're here, we want to find out because we have heard that there are some protection issues. But then you have a conversation with people and say, yes, protection issues are available. Yes, protection issues do exist in this community. However, we have our own cultural ways of dealing with these protection issues. Are you considering how we use our culture to deal with the protection issues? And aside from the protection issues that we do have, we have other needs that we consider to be, a priority for us. Are you considering those needs that we have? What I've discovered is that I consistently do assessments and researches and collect this information firsthand from people, community members that speak their mind truthfully to exactly what they want and what they want humanitarians to do. But then I take it back to my partners or to my donors, and then I still see that it is the initial plan that you had that is still being implemented, meaning that what I did in the field is not informing what you initially planned to do. I would leave that to rest now.
Yeah, but I will definitely come back and awaken it, because I think then the classic justification would be that you have an organization that is mandate driven, and that so basically there's somehow linked to a certain way of doing and what they can do. But when we went for a fondue yesterday at Le Paquis, your first fondue ever, I can highly recommend. I really appreciated how you came back from this. So we're gonna come back to you as well. I just realized as a facilitator, I made a little beginner mistake to ask those online to also present yourself if you want, so we know who's joining from where, and don't hesitate to drop your questions. And then our panelists online, if you feel free, or basically please feel free to then also pick up a few questions and respond in real time. All right. That being said, Leila, I want to give you the floor, because when we had our prep week a week ago, I realized that I don't know so much about how the humanitarian response is unfolding in Syria, and it seems to be fairly complex. When you try to do what you are doing as an AAP advisor, which is somehow getting closer to communities. Can you maybe paint the pictures also to our participants on what the challenges are that you encounter when trying to do your job there? You are muted. Yep.
Thank you for your question. Indeed, the situation and the context is unique in our context because I'm from local community as a AV advisor, this has helped me. As you mentioned, the coordination structure here is based in Turkey, and all the responses happen inside Syria. So most of the decisions are made across border rather than in close contact with the local community with appropriate engagement. So this is the main challenge that we face. Even the organization, most of the stuff, yes, there is a stuff inside Syria, but most of the decision happen here in cross-border situation. So kind of a solution, and what I'm trying to do is I did utilize the evidence base from CDAC research happened in 2023 after the earthquake, which showed that community trust in volunteer group as an intermediate group. So what we're aiming to do as inter-agency with other organization and with other actors in AAB, we create a new mechanism. I listened that we spend a lot of time of establish a new mechanism, but this time is this mechanism is led by community. So we call it local community of practice, is made up of volunteer and civil society representatives who are more trusted, as I said, from community than the traditional humanitarian actors. So the volunteers lead discussion platform, allowing them to better capture community priorities, and they will have a fixed agenda point in the decision-making meeting, such as HLG and ICCG. And we are looking to that as an accountability gap can be filled by enabling those local COP to serve as a liaison between communities and humanitarian organizations, giving them a direct influence the decision making, providing individuals with space where they can freely associate and express their views and interests and value. It could be also inject to diversity of opinion and foster an environment in which, as I said, various groups can advocate to ensure that the humanitarian response meet their needs and value. This diversity is crucial for ensuring that a wide range of perspectives are heard and considered. Yes, as you said, system change is always met with resistance, and this is what I challenge here, especially since we are talking about a context that has been in place for more than 10 years, and humanitarian actors are kind of accustomed to certain mechanisms, so the change from their perspective is kind of impossible. So we need to be courage to redefine the context and actor, as well as to look at the things from different perspectives, and affected community help us to discover this perspective. We just have to be humble, trust them. New forms of community engagement must overcome our fear of doing something wrong. I hope I covered your question.
You definitely did. Allow me then, before shifting to Suleiman and Caroline in a second, allow me to follow up on the first observation, which was that it seems that the volunteer group that you also helped set up are more trusted by communities. And so these volunteer group you said are representatives also of the civil society community. I wonder if you can tell us more about why you think that the traditional or the conventional aid actor did not have the same trust level or wasn't as trusted as these volunteers. Is there something about the studies that you mentioned that can explain us why that happened or why that is so?
Actually, I think the humanitarian actors face the same challenge, that they are based in Gaza and Tab and all the work inside Syria. And from like 10 years, I believe that the way of consulting the community, it wasn't working very well in this region. So because of this challenge working in cross-border, and if we talk about the concept of accountability of affected people when it's coming to our region, it's of course it's coming because there is gap in humanitarian work to lead led to response that no longer in line with the desire of local community and culture. So you find out after 10 years, we still working on distributing uh, a food basket rather than trying to build resilience. So the first meeting with local community of practice, we were testing to make validation with them about ICC prioritization strategy. So their input, it was really out of our what we planned to. So they give us a lot of different perspective that you don't need to focus on that. Yes, from long time you put the women head house as the most vulnerable people, but we can assure you that if they have another work as another source of work, you don't need to put them as the most vulnerable. And yes, they are right, because from long time all our project is just focusing on this vulnerability. So I think from now on, everything we are doing, we will go and validate it with community, because after 10 years, I can tell you from what I heard from those volunteer group and affected community, that the response is no longer in line with this, with their desire and culture and value.
Thank you, Leila. Suleiman, Caroline, I have to both of you probably the same question. You unfortunately couldn't make it to the venue. So I want to share with you one thing I saw in the hallway in the ground floor that you couldn't see and that you really missed out. It's a banner about accountability to affected populations, explaining what it is in 2 sentences. And so it reads, AAP is essential to ensure that decision-making power is in the hands of those affected by crisis. So that sounds fairly simple. And we have had now the AAP buzzword, lingering in the sector for over 10 years. We had the participation revolution, 2016. So why is it that all the efforts that we have put in so far, to make participation meaningful, to go away from participation washing, to actually put community priorities at the center, why is this not working well? Suleiman, maybe you want to give it a start, and then Caroline can take over.
Yeah, sure thing. And I hope that everybody can hear me. Very, very happy to be here this morning. I think to answer that question, we kind of have to look at it through what's known as the first principles thinking. And the aid system, the contemporary aid system as we know it, is about 70 or 75 years old. But humans have been delivering aid for thousands of years. And I think that's where the first problem starts, is the current aid system is designed to be a top-down system, where communities at best for a long time have been on the periphery, on the receiving end of aid, in every sense of the word. So both receiving aid, but also receiving the ramifications of what's wrong with the aid system. And when we try to speak about community participation or accountability to affected populations, we first have to question whether the current aid system is designed for these aspirations. Is the aid system actually designed for communities to be able to take a critical role in decision making? And I would say that it's actually not. And so this is the first challenge that we have to deal with. And so any effort that then happens to try and involve communities is fundamentally an effort to try and address symptoms and not necessarily root causes. If you look at, and we have to question, every single element of the aid system. It's designed to be very intimidating. It's designed, to be very exclusive. There's a distance between the community and the aid system, and you see it in the language that we use. You see it in the acronyms. You see it both in the physical space that exists between communities and the aid system. So there's both a physical and a psychological barrier, first of all, between communities and the aid system, and that is a fundamental challenge as to whether truly we mean what we say when we say that we want communities to be in a decision-making space. What we've seen so far has been primarily an effort aimed at gathering the insights of communities, not necessarily participation, but let's actually try and understand what communities think, what communities want. And that, while a noble effort in and of itself, has also kind of become really problematic. I think a lot of the evidence gathering community consultation that we see today is equivalent to open pit mining. you basically continue to dig, and you dig deeper, and you try to get as much as possible. It's a very extractive transactional process where we want to hear what the community says, but there really isn't a feedback loop necessarily. And that is often a conversation about the interventions. Was this intervention relevant for you? Did it help? It's never really a question of, for example, let's actually interrogate the theory of change behind this programming. Do these assumptions hold? What do you consider to be impact? What does success look like? And so I'll just end by saying that I think one, a fundamental shift would require us to actually examine the architecture, the ideology behind the aid system as we know it. And then we would have to say that every effort that we've seen, whether it's since 2016 or in contemporary times, has really been focused on addressing the symptoms and not the root causes.
Thank you, Suleiman. Caroline, do you want to compliment? You are muted. Sorry.
Sorry. Awesome. Thanks. Thanks so much, Chim, and thanks, Suleiman, for all the input that you've provided. I think I'll just want to reiterate most of the things that Suleiman has already spoken about. So first of all, we need to ask ourselves, how many people are in humanitarian crisis today? We are counting over 300 million people, and it's just predicted that it can only go up, not down. If you think about those of us who are working in the humanitarian sector, we are very few. So assuming that we can know everything that 300 million people and still counting would need to respond to their needs is actually almost suicidal. It's almost a suicidal decision of humanity. And one thing you want to question yourself is, where do we make these decisions? We make decisions on what to do in the humanitarian space in boardrooms, speaking to ourselves, deciding and putting it on paper. Meanwhile, community members who are also experiencing humanitarian crises are themselves thinking about what they could do to remedy their situation. Remember, when you are in crisis, you're not always waiting for someone sitting in a boardroom in New York, in London, in Geneva to come and help. You're looking for a solution to help you. So as we speak in our boardrooms, we must always remember that local communities who are facing crisis are also thinking about how they can help themselves. When we come with their solutions without listening to them, we must recognize the disruptive nature of the entry of our solutions and be cognizant of the paternalistic nature of the intrusion of the decisions that we bring from the boardrooms that we sit in. When we are thinking about these, we also allocate resources to the decisions that we're making in boardrooms, designing programs and designing solutions. And those solutions are then allocated resources. This whole process, if you thought about it, it is all requiring the time we sit in boardroom, the time for building these designs, all of these require resources. And most times you ask yourself, how much of the money that has been allocated to go into humanitarian aid actually end up in the hands of the people who need it? How much of the money that we say we are dedicating to the people who need to be supported actually end up in holding meetings, discussing designs that will not work, mining data, and building researches that we will never use, even though community members tell us what they need? We don't listen to them, and as Suleiman has said, it is just deep open pit mining. We always just want more and more information from people who are living in crisis, getting their data, getting information about their lives, their personal lives, getting into very personal spaces, but then not responding to the needs that go with the information that they entrust us with. This is why at Give Directly, one of the things that we are doing is putting people living in extreme poverty at the center of decision making. And what we believe is that poor people deserve dignity, they deserve to trust us, and they deserve to be given the choice. And that is why we put money in their hands unconditionally, no strings attached, because we know they know better than we do what situations they find themselves in. They know better than we do what money can do to change their lives. One example, one time when we were responding to a hurricane response in Texas, this is not even in Africa, this was in the US, where humanitarian actors literally bought material goods, and people's backyards and parking lots were packed with water, drinking water. And when we took the money, they said, look at my backyard. They brought me all this water. Do I need water? I don't need to drink water right now. What I need is to repair my lawnmower, to repair my lawn. But I need money to do it. I need to go and replace the things that were destroyed by the hurricane. I can't be able to do it with water. Do I need to sell this water back? That is exactly what the people are telling us. Please let us also help you think about what you can do to support us. If you think about the humanitarian sector and the aid sector generally, we are focusing a lot in building systems and processes, competing with each other on who will build the best process and the best system that can showcase you as an outstanding organization. The communities that you're serving don't understand those systems. They don't understand those processes. Those processes, you only are the ones who is understanding it, because we want to demonstrate how sophisticated we are. Community responses are not sophisticated. They're very simplistic and they can turn their lives around. And I think it's time for us to just step back and think about how can we create better impact with the resources that are put in our custody for the people that deserve these resources the most, and be able to put them at the center and allow them to be part of those decisions so that they can also at least tell us things that can impact their lives, because that is what is missing. Their voices are missing, their actions are missing, and their needs are not represented in all the boardroom discussions that we have about the challenges that they're facing.
Thank you so much, Caroline. This was powerful, and it also allows to shift more into, now that we painted the picture of all the problems that we are facing, also more looking at what is the solution, how can we do things right. And I think you started this solution seeking process by pointing out to the power of cash, and how it allows to shift power actually to communities who can make their own choice on how you use it. Suleiman, you mentioned the fact that when participation is done, there's quite often no feedback loop, and it ties to what Caroline said as well, this idea of like gathering more and more information, but not really having a change thought behind it. And I think also the water example in Texas is powerful. In our programs at GTS and DRC, there was one community, when we asked them what's going wrong when they get aid, they said, well, for 5 years now, we're getting mosquito nets the whole time. That's all we get. We can give mosquito nets to each of the mosquitoes around us so they can protect themselves as well. That's how many mosquito nets we have. And so, Talatu, maybe coming back to you, what is it then when we try now to go to the solution side and we start again on the community level? How can participation work? What is maybe needed, what you haven't seen yet? And then taking again this feedback loop element, we also talked about it yesterday. What is your take on this?
Well, I would say, as starting from an enumerator from about 2018 to date, I've had only one feedback session that has gone back to the community. And that was in, I think, the third circle of the GTS activity that we've been having. One feedback session that required me to go back to the community and say, okay, from the activity that I did with you a few months ago, these are the preliminary results that I got from your responses. And I wanted to find out from you whether this is a true reflection of what you said, because I wasn't there. I sent enumerators to get data from you. And to tell you that the reception was blatant shock. They couldn't believe that there is an organization that can actually come back and ask if what they said is a true reflection of what, the initial responses are. Because we know that mindsets changed, right? What I could probably have said to you in the morning, by noon, by lunchtime, after a full belly, I could probably have a different perspective, right? So when we had that session, not only did we get bigger, better, wider perspectives, but then we earned a higher level of community trust, right? And the next time I came for the next cycle of, let's say, a GTS activity or another assessment activity, the reception was quite, better. Because initially, before that feedback session, we would hear, oh, these people are here to always keep us for 1 hour, 2 hours, asking us questions that we know they're not going to do anything about. What I'm trying to point out is, and to tie out the comments that Laila, Caroline, and Suleiman have said, is that when we engage with the communities, right? There are certain practices that we do that at the end of the day are not to our advantage. First and foremost is the use of community volunteers. I know as humanitarians, we think that we're giving back to the community, we're empowering the community. No. What it does, at least in my experience in my region, is that it shifts power from the humanitarian actors to a certain number of people in the community who can do and undo while you're all in the boardrooms making those decisions. What that does is that it elongates the distance between the humanitarian actors and the community that we're supposed to be helping, right? I am a research lead. I just come and question and then take back the information to you who makes the decision. And in several of GTS assessments and every other assessments, I'm doing several third-party monitorings also at the same time. What I hear is that we need the humanitarian actors to come and see what we are going through. And yesterday over Fondue, I was telling Tim that there are partners that have been in Nigeria in the Northeast for 3-4 years and do not know their way to the community. I understand security challenges, right? But there are ways around it. There are ways in which we can interface with the community at a first-hand basis that really gives us a better picture for us to be informed in making the decisions in the boardrooms. Now, another point that I also want to talk about, hope I'm not taking so much time, is that the point that Suleiman made, and that is the top-down approach that we have, right? I mentioned to Tim yesterday also that when we get money from the donors, really, when you look at it critically, and I say I'm part of the problem because I'm employed as a humanitarian, majority of the money goes in the running costs. We have to, also tying down to what Caroline just mentioned, we need people to do the implementation. We need people to interface with the community. But the point is that the resource allocation is to the disadvantage of the community itself, right? We spend so much money on meetings, on Zoom calls, on taking flights and doing so much. And then by the time we finish all these plans, which we do not make based on the actual field data that we're collecting, we just come in and then impose what we think is best for the community. Consistently, I go into a community and say, okay, I'm here to find out how do you feel about how cash is being distributed? How do you feel about how hygiene kits are being distributed? How do you feel about how the borehole or the well or the latrines were fixed? And consistently I had, do you people think that that is really what we need? Yes, even in terms of cash. Yes, you would think that everybody would be so excited to receive cash. But then there's several people who tell you, okay, fine, you've given me cash, but you haven't equipped me to know what to do with the cash. Neither have you asked me if the cash you're giving me is the right amount for what I need. What I call for is the flexibility in our mandates. It is very strict, and as Suleiman also mentioned, it's very strict. It's so old, it's not changing, it's not flexible, for the benefit of the community. We do need to, first and foremost, supervise the people that we call our community volunteers. You cannot just say, I'm going to interface with this community through a certain select number of people, which in my experience, when you give them that power and you say, okay, select the people that you think are vulnerable, there are 3 or 4 communities where I have seen that a community leader has his extended families on that vulnerable list, even people who are not in the community, people who are living in other states. He has them on that. So when aid is going to be distributed, because humanitarian actors have considered it to be localization or empowerment or, trust, he calls all his entire extended family from other states. They come in, queue up, right? And collect the aid that is meant for the actual vulnerable people in his community. But then as a humanitarian actor, because you're far removed from the process, you wouldn't know that. And then when I come in and I collect that data and I tell you that this is what is going on, but because you have already done your plan and you want, if you are supposed to take the information I give to, make a few changes, it's going to disrupt your time, your work plan, right? So you say, okay, let's just implement this. And then in the next circle, whatever it is Talatu brought with her team, we'll try to figure it in and factor it in. And, you know, by that time, it's no longer as, you know, stark, as red, as, you know, hot as it was when I initially brought it. Then you'll be like, okay, let's call Talatu again. Her team, go find out what the situation is. I bring the same information again. You say, okay, we implement it in the next circle. What I call for is that let us reduce the distance between us, humanitarian actors, right, and the community. And let us not decide that 2-3 people in regions where you know that the political fabric, the sentimental fabric, the religious fabric, the cultural fabric has a way of influencing that localization or that power that you're giving to a select few in a community. Let us be involved to a reasonable degree as to how those people that we trust and think that the community trusts represent us in the field. Because what we really do is give power to certain people who can manipulate it as however they want. And over the years, what I've discovered is that they are also learning from the interfacing that they do with you. So they know the keywords to tell you. Because as humanitarians, we know that when somebody says accountability to affected person, localization, empowerment, this, then we'll be like, okay, yes, this is great. So what I know is that these volunteers, these community volunteers, they're learning. They know the keywords to tell you, and then you'll be like, everything is great. And then you go back. No, things are not great. Things are really not great. You have to interface, even if you must interface through community volunteers, you must interface with those community volunteers at a first-hand basis. You must do that. And you must engage the community at a level where you hear exactly what they want. And to a certain acceptable degree, impute that. Yesterday, I spoke to Tim about I know that sectors and clusters have mandates. And some of these mandates are technically, I would say, set in stone. But then there's always room for flexibility. There's always room for collaboration. So in fact, I always go back to the protection issue because it's a deeply cultural issue in Nigeria, especially in the Northeast, right? Where they don't talk about it, but you know, they have their own low ways of dealing with these things, right? So you go into a situation where protection is what took you there. You want to interface with people who have experienced protection issues, right? And if you have me doing your data collection, of course, I would dig deep till I get what you want me to get, right? But then I will also dig so deep that I will be able to tell you that aside from protection issues, there are needs in terms of education, there are needs in terms of WASH, there are needs in terms of this. What I would call for is a situation where if your mandate is set in stone, in concrete, but then there are other people who have mandates for the key priority needs of that community, why not collaborate with those people? So that at the end of the day, what you're implementing in the community settles your mandate and also caters for what the community really needs. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There's so many angles now I can use to continue the conversation. Let me maybe pick one that you said at the beginning. You mentioned that some of the aid agencies in Nigeria don't even know the way to communities. And then you also said there are ways around to find the way to communities. And I think, Leila, your initiative in Northwest Syria has shown that indeed there are ways, because there was an opportunity of giving lead to volunteers, trusted by community, and make sure that they are running these platforms themselves. I wonder, as you have found your way there and probably have done a more genuine participation than we have observed in other responses, what are the differences that you have seen in terms of, you know, be it the quality of aid, be it the feedback that was also given through these platforms? Is it for you an example of doing participation right?
Yes, thank you. So I can say that accountability affected people have many layers. So I give you just one example of having mechanism led by a volunteer group that they showed up they trust it from community. But you have different layer. You have to have many and different channel to make this consultation, and not end up with just you have checklist and you finish your checklist at the end and you looks good, as my colleague said. We have to be sure that we are partnership with the community and not working by ourselves. Yes, we are expert in humanitarian worker, maybe, but of course we are not experienced with the local community culture and the local community value. So we must always remember that, and that we have to rely on them. They are the experts. They are the expert in their situation. They are the expert in their value, and we are here to serve them. And they are also experts in the relationship and the structure between the community themselves, because each community have their unique, and don't go there and just try another way of communication and consultation with community that works in another context. It might be harmful for the new context that you are going to work on. And we have to be, I encourage all of us to be working with intermediate group to help us on make this liaison and have a different layer of accountability, not just intermediate group, not just NGO, not just the we have to have also the mechanism that led by community themselves that also there. And all of those layers can contribute to have one vision at the end and have this different vision that give you the whole picture at the end. It's our responsibility to find way to engage with the children, people with disability, affected people, because simply it's their right. It's not about only they have needs, they have right. We have to remember always that they have right, not just needs. If we need really to succeed in AAB process, we need all of us to trust them and empower them for them to understand our system. The first meeting with local COP, yes, as my colleague said, they don't know anything about our system. They don't know who's cluster, who we are, who are they. They don't know even that the community trusts them the most. And it was a surprise for them. So all the discussion going around that, how they will play a critical role to empower and enhance the accountability to affected people, not give them a space to have a decision. They will play a role of the validation, of going with direct communication with the affected community. And we have another mechanism to have this direct communication. Yes, this is from my end.
Thank you so much, Laila. And maybe, Suleiman, let me bring you back to the discussion, because what Caroline also raised when she was talking about looking for solutions is that currently, and I think Talata, you also alluded to this, when you do plans and the way the aid architecture is structured, very little from what the resources that are supposed to go to the community actually reach the community, which is why cash is probably a very interesting way around it. Now, what you founded a few months ago, I think, tries to touch on this barrier in really shifting more resources towards the community. So properly doing localization, how in theory and in policy it's supposed to be. Can you give a bit more about, or can you provide a bit more information about what exactly did you found, why you founded it, and why you think it can be a solution to the question that is guiding this panel here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Tim. So yeah, maybe I'll spend a few seconds talking about what we're trying to do at Common Reserve, which is basically, laying the foundation for what over time we're hoping will be a dedicated bank for the system. The reason why we went with this approach is we realized that, if you look at the aid system and you basically kind of, try and create two distinct functions or things that take place within the aid system, is one, there's the business of running organizations. So finance, operations, everything that's associated with the aid business. And then there's the more important work of delivering impact and results for communities. And what we found out is that, again, by nature of the way that this system is structured, a lot more time is spent on the business of running the organization and a lot less time on the business of delivering impact for communities and engaging with communities. And we realized that, in as much as communities themselves are victims of this reality, the organizations that are trying to deliver assistance for these communities are also themselves victims of this reality. And so what we're trying to do with this platform is basically, free up this organization so that they're able to spend a little bit more time and resources on engaging with communities and a lot less time on worrying about compliance, worrying about how to move resources from point A to point B, which is what consumes a lot of the time. And so as we even start to craft solutions, so again, that's the idea of why we've created this, this platform. In the short term, try and solve some of the pain points around how do we move resources from point A to point B, which I know a lot of the people in the room and those of us that are joining online typically grapple with. A lot of research has been done on this. Sometimes, nonprofit organizations could, and the leaders of these organizations spend anything between 30 to 60% of their time thinking about this kind of stuff. Funders are demanding this. And so we find ourselves actually in a reality where, and again, if we want to see change, we also have to start seeing a reality where donors are, spending a lot more time in trying to fund and pay for impact and not pay for compliance, which is again the reality of the system that exists today. And so at a systemic level, what we hope that we can do is maybe alter the business model so that organizations have a lot more time and a lot more resources to engage with the communities. At a structural level, what this would then mean is, if we can find a way to get resources, to communities quicker, more efficiently, whether we're doing cash interventions, whether we're doing procurement in a better way, whether we're, thinking through market-based solutions that is not distorting the market reality in a lot of these communities, then overall aid and the experience of, delivering assistance becomes more meaningful. And we basically have communities, starting to appreciate what removing these bottlenecks means. So maybe I think the first half of our conversation might have created the impression that we're blaming aid organizations for a lot of the problems that exist. But I think we also have to think about a reality where the structure and the design of this system itself doesn't free up a lot of these organizations, to be able to do what they would have loved to do, because it's very easy to be, deemed non-compliant. And this, again, there's a survival mindset in this system. You do something wrong and you're out. And there's almost a list of organizations down the block that are very, very ready to step into that system. We also see an issue of mandate and competence, right? So we have everyone in the organization worrying about this day-to-day operational needs, and that crowds out the room for the kind of expertise, the patient capital, the engagement that we would have loved to see if we truly want to see communities, making these kind of decisions. And so, as long as we have this cloud hanging over our heads of, forget about, engaging communities or putting communities at the center, this organization might not be existing tomorrow if this transaction doesn't happen, or if we're deemed to be non-compliant, or if this cost is disallowed. And so what we're hoping to do is work at these two levels, a structural level and a systemic level. At the systemic level, hopefully over time, craft a new reality where a different business model is possible. At a structural level, hopefully, free up, organizations so that they don't have to worry about some of these day-to-day constraints that they run into. And we hope that if we do that, then we can, I think, allow for more meaningful relationships to be formed, some more conversations like these to be had, and hopefully more resources at the disposal of these communities in a way that addresses the concerns of everybody that's along this value chain. So the funders, the communities, the organizations that are the interlocutors of the aspirations of these communities.
Thank you, Sulman. Thank you so much, Caroline. One of the business models that you now with Give Directly is proposing is doing basically everything with cash and trusting the final person that is being targeted to do just fine with this cash. Now, over the past years, cash has become more important and has gained momentum and is more and more being used as a modus operandi. Is this going in the right direction? And is then even participation, it's a bit of a provocative question, but is it then even needed in the way that we are trying to find out how it should be done. Is cash not maybe the better solution?
Tim, those are really good questions, and I'd want to start first of all by, speaking to what Suleiman had talked about is, are we all doing the wrong thing? The one thing that we should know that there is still a need of all the other things that are happening. There is a need for healthcare, there is a need for education, there is a need for infrastructure. There is a need for strengthened government response to public needs and public goods. So everything still becomes relevant in the lives of the people that we are serving. One thing that we have to step back and ask ourselves, if I am providing a service, I am providing information, whatever it is that I'm providing, if I compared it with just giving the money I'm investing in delivering that service to the people, would it be better if I just gave them the money, or is it better if I did whatever it is that I'm doing for them? So I think those are questions that we need to ask ourselves, whether it is better to do what I'm doing, or whether it is better to just give people the money and allow them to respond to those needs. Now, is cash the way to go? Globally, right now, we have like about 300 studies that have been conducted, randomized control trials, that are providing the proof for whether cash works or doesn't. And it provides for contexts where you may want to think about alternatives. So when you're thinking about cash, we should not be thinking about a blanket response. You must be able to understand, is the context I'm going to be working in, conducive for delivering of cash? That said, at Give Directly, we have also done over 20 studies today that have given us the confidence that, we are in the right direction. We should continue giving people cash and give it unconditionally, so that it puts power in their hands, puts choice in their hands, and gives them the dignity that they need as humans. That said, it's also very important that when we are asking ourselves, if you're giving people money, then maybe we shouldn't even think about participation. No, actually, there are very many questions that you need to ask when you're delivering cash. And at Give Directly, we have done a study where we have asked recipients to give us their preferences. And it's preference around what time should we be sending you money? What season is it best delivered to you? How much is best responsive to your needs? How should we be contacting you or engaging with you to understand some of the challenges that you are facing or you are dealing with? So it still needs us to participate and let people talk to you. We have seen where people have told us, yes, give me money, but please give me when we are just about the planting season so it can help me with my farms. You wouldn't know that if you did not speak to communities. So that is a form of participation, which enhances the power that we are putting in the hands of people when we are giving them cash. It's also very important that we have to assess our activities as organizations, basically audit ourselves to see how well we are doing in terms of giving people the space to be a part of the solution that we are delivering to their communities. Most times, if you think about this, it's usually about monitoring the delivery of the design that we have already built. So basically, we are asking ourselves if we are doing well in accordance with our own perspective, but never in the perspective of the people that we are serving, which is, very, very important. As, one of the speakers has already spoken about, it is important that we listen to people to even know that the impact of the work that we are doing is actually changing their lives. One of the things that I've observed also in the sector is that because of the discussions and the decisions that we are making away from the communities, we are indoctrinating people to tell us what we want to hear. So then sometimes when you think you're doing very well, it is basically what I would imagine from a researcher's perspective, what would be called researcher desirability. So people tell you what you want to hear because they don't want you to go away. And that's because we have demonstrated so much power that we have dehumanized people, even from the ability of speaking about the genuine, the genuineness of what they feel about the interventions that we're giving them. And I will give an example. Some time back, as I was in this same sector, I was doing water sanitation project, and you could see the excitement in communities as we told them, we're going to be bringing water tanks and we will be constructing latrines and we will be doing this. And they would come to meetings, and then we get into work with our artisans and do all the work and construct the facilities. At the end of the day, they love what comes out of it. But when you come back post-implementation and ask them, What do you think? They will tell you, this was brought to us by X organization. In fact, we are waiting for them to come back and repair it. Basically, what they're telling you, what you brought here is not what we wanted. You know, you dig a well or a borehole, the next thing, the borehole is broken down. The community cannot even come together to repair it. You ask them, why aren't you repairing it? I have many other priorities. I need my child to go to school. I have my husband who is sick. I have my farm is running with weeds, is full of weeds. I have no time and I have no resources to put on the borehole. But this borehole is also helping with what? This water was brought by so and so and so and so. We are hoping that they can come back and help us fix it. Now, are we then saying that, everything should go cash? Actually, when you speak cash, cash is nothing. Cash is just a means to an end. It would still take us to all the other things that we are talking about. And I will give an example of a project that we have implemented in Mozambique. So when we went into Mozambique, as you know, Mozambique is prone to, cyclones. So we did a cyclone response. And as we did this project, in our minds, we said, if you give people cash, and plus the donors, we were discussing this, we're like, actually, if we give people cash, we are thinking maybe these people are going to take this money and they will put in their farms, so there will be improvements in agricultural output. If we were an NGO, we would say, let's go and do an agricultural project, because in our minds, agriculture is what we think would be responding to the needs of these people, which is securing their livelihoods. Then we send the money and the story becomes very different. Of course, there are people who invest in their farms, but quite a number of people actually invest in strengthening their houses. And they say, if I have a stable house, I have a safe storage for my farm produce, I have a safe place for my family to live, I have more confidence, I have more dignity. This means so much to me than just putting money on the farm. Because even if I put it in a farm and I don't have a place where I can store it properly, it will still be washed away, plus me and my children. Now that I have a stronger house, I don't have to worry running away because I have a stable residence. So it is going back to the same thing. All the things that we are doing are very important things. They are needed, they are critical, but we may not know when and how communities would want them to be delivered to them. So even as we think through those solutions, we should bring them to the communities with a genuineness of involvement, participation, of listening to them, and genuinely showing them why we are able or not able to implement their feedback, because then we build trust. If people give us feedback about what they need, and then we go back and do a different thing from what they have proposed, basically they feel disrespected, they lose the trust with us, and they feel as if they are being treated as lesser humans and their thoughts are not considered. And if you're found in a situation of poverty, nothing is devastating as someone listening to you and then trashing away your contribution. You feel more useless, you feel more disempowered, and you feel not trusted. So I think, all said and done, cash has given us a lot of confidence. In one, simplifying the delivery of aid. Two, building trust and dignity in communities, putting the choice in their hands, and facilitating true participation, true feedback, where people feel like they're in control. In one of the communities in Kenya, and as I finalize, in one of the communities in Kenya where we delivered cash, the community members told us, we have had very many organizations come here to support us. We have seen them come with different projects, but we have never known the magnitude of the money that they have to come and help us. You Give Directly has given us the opportunity to see how much money donors are putting to come and help us, because you have put that money in our hands. What kind of genuine feedback would you require? Which means, even when we tell them we are bringing water tanks and we're building health programs, there is a level of grayness, there is opacity in the way that we are dealing with them, and they know it. They know that there is money. They don't know how much money there is. But when they see that money getting into their hands, they start asking themselves, surely, if all this money could come in our communities, then we would be so far away. I think it is a rallying call that communities are telling us, let's ask ourselves, is the money we are getting to do humanitarian response, to do aid and development, doing enough to give people confidence in their communities that we are actually delivering on what donors, philanthropists, and benefactors have entrusted us with.
Thank you, Caroline. It's good that you say that speaking to communities remains important and that cash cannot take away this element. Otherwise, in GTS, we would have had to reinvent ourselves. But so I'm conscious of time, and we wanted to, before going to the Q&A session, there's one last round of question that we wanted to allow basically for all of your panelists to take the floor one last time with a call to action. What needs to change to improve the thing? At the same time, there's one final question that I also want to ask out of my own curiosity. And Suleiman, I don't know if I'm allowed to challenge you on this. You know, when we talk about community priorities, when we do work at GTS, we do quite often hear people asking for cash because they say with cash, that's how we can structure our own priorities. That comes out quite often, I suppose also in the managerial programs of GTS. What we also hear quite often is, well, we want peace and we need security. So, Suleiman, can I ask you, how is that the new mission of humanitarians? If the community priority is peace and security, how can we deliver on this?
I think going back to the issue of the first principles thinking, right? I think what you just asked is a manifestation of the inadequacy of the system as it is right now, which is it's not what this was designed for, right? We had 30, 40 years ago, we had a very clear distinction between humanitarian work, development work, peace building work. Those lines are very blurred right now. Every now and then we kind of have a new title come in or a new line of work come in. We've heard of resilience, we've heard of livelihood. We kind of have this few kind of pivots and twists that come in the process, which comes out of a realization that what we thought we were doing isn't working. Maybe let's tweak it a little bit and try and change it. I think what your question alludes to, or basically helps us kind of accept the reality, is with a level of humility as well, is that this system as it is right now, and the mandate of the current mandate of humanitarian organizations, for example, doesn't allow this organization to respond to these needs, because as Caroline said, and as Talatu said, you have a specific mandate within your organization, and that's what you want to deliver on. But again, to kind of challenge everyone on that is we only hear this from organizations that they're not equipped, or it's not in their mandate to do this, when it's a demand-driven request, not when it's a supply-driven request. We've seen, if you look at, the metamorphosis of international organizations that have existed for the past 3-4 decades, you will easily find an organization that started out working on food security today doing work on microfinance, because the supply-driven mechanism has demanded that that's what they need to work on, and this is what the funding available is for. So we see this, agility when the supply-driven system demands it. Right? When donors say that we will only fund, COVID response or pandemic response, all of a sudden an organization that used to do work on food security is now a COVID specialist. And it's so easy to transform quite easily. It's not as easy when it's demand driven. When the community says, look, we're not interested in food vouchers, we're interested in sustainable peace, then all of a sudden you hear the organization say, yeah, that's not within our mandate. It's a very quick answer. And the contrast is so clear between the supply-driven reality and the demand-driven reality. And again, this is where we see another manifestation of participation washing. This top-down system is a supply-driven system. It often is more agile, more responsive to the needs of donors, to the priorities of donors, and not to the priorities of communities. That in itself also highlights where the levels of responsibility sit if we truly want to see an end to participation washing. We have different layers within this system, and everyone that sits at each of these different layers bears a certain responsibility. For the donors, I said earlier that we have to see a reality where we move away from paying for compliance to start paying for impact. Participation washing right now primarily exists because community engagement is a checklist exercise. It's a requirement for funding. You have to show me within your proposal that you have engaged with the community. You have to show me what community mechanisms exist, whether it's a grievance one, whether it's a project management one, whether it's a monitoring and evaluation one, you know, whichever facet that you want to give this to. I have to show this in my proposal because the donor has demanded so. And then what you see then is a trickle down effect. It's a cascading, right? And the latest innovations that we see in community involvement is we're now actually starting to demand from communities that they create these mechanisms themselves. We don't even want to do it anymore. We actually ask them to do it. We give them the burden of doing it, and we also, in some ways, actually expect them to even co-fund this. We move them away from their, you know, the socioeconomic realities and the pressures that they have to deal with. We now demand that they make time for this kind of structures, for this kind of mechanisms. And without doing that, then your project cannot be considered, you know, to be eligible for this kind of funding. So what you see from top down is everybody's passing the buck down to whoever is in a slightly more disadvantaged position and therefore likely to. Tim, to answer your question, I think one is there's an architecture, you know, question. There's a systemic, you know, issue where we see these problems only because we're in a supply-driven mechanism or a supply-driven system and not a demand-driven system. If we're in a demand-driven system and we start from the needs of communities, what that then means is we will see an evolution in the type of organizations that exist, you know, to meet the needs of these communities. You know, for example, you know, to Caroline's, you know, comments, Give Directly has emerged out of a need, out of a realization that we need to fundamentally shift how we deliver aid to these communities. And over time, as we start, for example, to accept, it's funny because, you know, 15 years ago, local actors and communities are the ones that started suggesting cash as a really effective you know, means of you know, delivering aid. The international system actually shrugged and was very reticent because we were very concerned about fraud and compliance issues and safeguarding and everything else. And then over time, the Overton window has shifted. We've now accepted cash. And what you will then see is, in addition to the specialist organizations that exist, like Give Directly, whose entire mandate and system is around delivering this cash through an evidence-based mechanism, you'll start to see a lot more organizations pivot because this is what the donor now wants to fund. And I think as long as we start to see these supply-driven pivots, we're going to continue seeing participation washing.
Suleiman, thank you so much. Meg, because of my selfish move to sneak in this question, we're running a bit out of time, but it would be a bit embarrassing to talk about participation and don't allow people to participate. Can you lead by example on the very last question and keep it very short when it comes to basically point out what needs to change in order to do better?
It's an easy question to answer in 30 seconds. Thanks so much, and thank you so much to all of our amazing panelists. It's been a really great discussion. I mean, I think from our perspective, we're always sort of advocating for things to be considered with a bit more complexity, as I sort of mentioned at the start of the meeting. We see so much sort of challenges that come up through participation being met with more participation, and it just becomes this endless loop of people participating with absolutely no impact, which, as Suleiman just said, is really sort of an ethical question at a certain time. And so I think we're kind of at a period of reflection and soul searching in the sector about what is our role, what isn't our role, and where can we sort of move to more of a model of solidarity where a lot of different people who are working on a lot of different things are brought into the discussion, but the real starting point for the discussion is at the community level. And there's still a lot of resistance to that idea. We talk a lot to donors, our donors and other donors about, you know, what are you sort of doing to allow for or encourage or push for that prioritisation discussion to happen at the local level, given the continued rhetoric around the fact that the humanitarian system doesn't have enough money. And there's always a bit of awkward silence when we sort of push on that point. And I know it's incredibly difficult. Some ways that we're trying to address it at the moment are some pilot work with humanitarian pooled funds to look at, you know, at least on a sort of smaller scale, is it possible for communities to be more involved in these tough decisions rather than just kind of being consulted around the edges? So I think the call to action is to use this pressure on the humanitarian system to look at, you know, how do we sort of create spaces for more of the hard conversations to happen at the community level, and how is everyone involved in this sector either helping or hindering that process? I think there's really a lot that donors can do, and we're kind of deep in some of those discussions at the moment. But I think we should just question anything that seems to be accountability that comes from within the sector, because there's really a limit to what that can achieve.
Thank you, Meg. Talatu, your final words on the same question. What needs to change?
I think generally we really need to look at what does localization mean in the context in which we are operating, right? So localization in Nigeria in the Northeast would really look different than localization will look in another, you know, crisis-driven environment. We really need to operate within the context in which we as humanitarian actors, you know, do our work. If we continue to apply the same old top-down system, what that does is that it puts us in a very repetitious cycle. We are unable to do as much as we really set out to do. And that is what I would term that will continue in this whole tokenistic approach. So we really need to look at how is localization going to be effective or impactful in the context of where we are operating, right? If going by the way of giving cash directly, it's, you know, it's going to be impactful in the context in which you're operating, I think that is the way to go. We shouldn't be stuck in operating in the same systems irrespective of where we are. So if, for instance, you want to, it's not possible even for you as an individual to operate within the same system. When you move from one area to the other, you make adjustments that suits you in that particular area. So if we have this top-down systems that Suleiman is talking about, which has been in existence for such a long time, however, when we want to implement in, let's say, in Nigeria or in Congo or in something, we should be able to reflect the contextual geography of that area into our systems so that we can have effective localization, so that it can be more impactful. If not, we will continue to apply the same rules, and then we'll continue to have this whole cycle of participation washing. We feel as if we've done much, but the community does not really feel it, right? Take, for instance, the examples that Caroline mentioned. I think I've done researches in IDP camps where I saw so many water points, you know, not working. And I asked one of the camp leaders, I said, what's going on? Is it that the community is not able to come together and do something? Really, what took me there was different. But this was kind of like a side question to find out why it was like that. And he told me that really, we just woke up one morning and we saw that they were putting water points. Nobody asked us. We were not involved in the whole decision. So we're assuming that as is bad now, the same organization will follow the same system that they followed and come and fix it. So I said, what would naturally be an acceptable way for this thing to have been done? He said, well, if you had come here and you have mentioned that you wanted to bring water, or if water is our main issue, right? We would have been able to tell you, because this is an IDP camp, there are several people from different locations with different experiences and talents that you could have, involved in creating those water points, in digging those boreholes, in digging those water points. Because at that moment, what you're doing is meeting a need and at the same time empowering and involving the community. So what I'm saying is that revisit what you term or what you define as localization, and let it be done in the context of the area in which you are working in. Do not apply what you did in, let's say, Congo here in Nigeria, and then even in Nigeria, do not apply what's working in the Northeast in the Northwest, because you're dealing with two different cultural backgrounds, two different sets of people, two different varied needs, and all of that. So it's very, very important for us to look at where we're working and what will work for that particular area. And then as we move into that, we'll make those adjustments, because it really goes back to my initial points. Mandates, we like to make them look as if they're set in stone. But as Suleiman mentioned, when it's a donor that wants a change, we're quick to adapt. But then when it's a community that wants that change, we say, no, we can't move in that way. So I think flexibility and then a contextual definition of what localization is would be like the right way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Talatu.
Yeah.
Leila, over to you. What is your take on this?
Because on the reality that the system is there and it will not go overnight. So I feel that our role now, all of us, to be sure that like our work and mandate, it's mandatory when we want to work as any AAB activity to be take place with partnership with community and intermediate group, and don't go just to assuming that we know better. So my takeaway is make it mandatory. No more work without partnership with the community, real partnership with the community, back to them and telling them, even if we fail, tell them what have been done and why we fail. Yeah, this is my outcome.
Thank you. And thank you also for the very efficient use of time. Caroline, your final call to action before we go over to Suleiman and then to the questions of the participants.
Yeah. For me, I think one of the things that we have to ask ourselves, I'd put myself in different buckets. Number one, if you are a donor, ask yourself, how far is your money going? What impact is your money creating? And can you quantify that impact by the dollar that you're committing to the work that you have supported? If you are an aid agency or a humanitarian agency, ask yourself, when do I feel comfortable that I have done enough to deliver the highest level of impact for the communities that I am serving? Is the intervention that I am choosing the best for the communities that I am serving, and does it reflect their needs? There is a need for us all to think about how we can break down the information that we have in the spaces that we speak as experts in this sector, so that that information gets down to the communities where we are, the communities we are serving. As we speak today, the things that we are talking about here are things that have global impact. One of the things that you can be sure about is that the communities we are serving, and maybe local organizations, community-based organizations, a lot of them don't know about these things. They don't know about these priorities. So they would not even know how important it is for them to speak. So how do we make sure that we, in our work and in the way that we engage with the communities, we are able to demonstrate a readiness to release power into the hands of people? Like I said, ask yourself and compare your interventions in comparison with cash. If I am doing an intervention, if I just gave people the money and allowed them to make the decision, would it go a long way? And would I feel proud about how far the resources I have to support that community has taken them?
Thank you, Caroline.
Up to you, team.
Suleiman, what needs to change most to change the status quo?
I'll just keep it to one. I think we just have to move away from this mentality that is very difficult and it's very that is insurmountable to a mentality where it's very much possible. And rather than treating this as a problem, I think we treat it as a new opportunity to actually enter into a new social contract and basically lay the foundations of a new aid system that's rooted in communities, that starts from communities. And let's treat this not as a wicked problem, but rather an opportunity to do things better.
Thank you so much. All right, we are there in terms of allowing now you people in the room, but also in the virtual room, to take the floor if you want. I see a hand go. Oh my gosh, I see a lot of hands. I'm so sorry. All right, well, let's start with the first hand, and then on my left, do we have a mic? No, you have mics. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Thanks. I'll be quick. My name is David. I work for Rocha. On top of all the wise things that were said, I want to mention two issues that I have not heard of and which would deserve their own hour of debate. One is donors are imposing an impossible contradiction by the fact of calling for more participation and imposing to their recipients due diligence criteria, which make them able to give only money to major agencies and major NGOs. There is a problem there. It's a barrier to anything you want to do on participation and localization. To cut it short, by the youth group of the refugee camp not having their account certified by PricewaterhouseCoopers impedes me to give them even $5,000. So there is an issue there that should be addressed, and I think it's well identified, but I see nobody acting on it. The second one is, I think we should nuance a bit the "they know better." Is it so simple that as soon as it comes out of the community, this is the right thing to do? Or are there some cases where we have to be a bit careful to not perpetuate mechanisms of dominance which are existing in that community? I think that's a very broad topic which is little addressed so far, because it might sound like conservative, politically incorrect to go over that. And I think we should unpack that and look at the barrier or the limitations to the "they know better." Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I wish we had more time to unpack this, but these are very crucial and super interesting points. The person, I think you're part of the Red Cross family, I would guess. Please take the floor.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the discussions, very clear and very good. First, my name is Patrick Duncan Piri. I come from Malawi. I work for Malawi Red Cross. I'm part of the Red Cross family. I was happy, especially hearing about the community engagement, trust. You know, trust takes time to build, but trust can take little time to break. Yeah, so we really need to nurture the trust. The communities must trust what we do. I can give a practical example. In my country, Red Cross had a program in a certain area. Of course, we are still there. So we did a number of interventions, and we also implemented what we call community feedback mechanism, where people would talk to us, would also talk to them, would close the loop, and also then we had also another organization that came in the area, like working together, because we encourage also working together with other organizations. So this organization brought in a water facility in that area, a borehole. So they drilled a borehole, and during the time of handover, the committees were brought together to witness the handover. So the committees kept on referring this organization to Red Cross. Thank you, Red Cross, you have done this. Thank you, Red Cross. They even composed a song about Red Cross. But they were reminded that this facility is not here by Red Cross. It's by this organization. But they kept on saying Red Cross. So after the event, then someone went there to ask, but why did you always refer to Red Cross? They said Red Cross built trust. Red Cross listened to us. Whatever we need, we talk to Red Cross. And even if they can't do it, they come to us and they say, sorry, we would have done this, but we don't have the resources. Or go to government so that they can come to you, or we'll talk to this other organization so that they can come to you to help you. So what I'm trying to say is we really need to build trust with communities. Thank you.
Well noted. Thank you so much. Any other questions? The man at the background, and then don't hesitate to ask questions as well.
Yes. No. I think it's interesting because this is, I think, my third HNPW, and I looked at the sessions in this HNPW. We have almost 50 sessions on AAP and localization, and last year was something similar as well. And I think the question is like, where is the barrier? Like, you know, all the things that you're talking about, we all know. We understand the challenges. We understand the hypocrisy. We keep on saying we need to do better, but where is the challenge? And I think as long as we keep on saying that it's another person or another group that has to be responsible for making this change, nothing will happen. I think it's more of a call. So I think because you wanted the question, I'll ask you a question. In the midst of all these challenges, I'm sure there must be some good things that we're doing, because I am for identifying the things that we do wrong, but I'm also for championing the things that we do right. Do you see some sort of hope that there are certain things that we do that makes us, like, we're on the right track? Do you see the religieux at the end of that fondue pot? Or do you think that it's just fondue and bread all out? Thank you.
Yeah, nice comeback. Who wants to talk about good practice? Because we also at GTS, we do hear about good practices, and we have also heard firsthand that things can get better and have improved. You mentioned as well at the beginning what you've heard 10 years ago, and now the feeling that communities also talk about empowerment, so they know that there's more opportunities and more potential. Maybe Talatu, do you want to take this one? Meg, do you want to compliment?
Yeah, I think the thing with occasions such as this is we tend to, as you mentioned, focus on things that are not working well. But that is not to say that there aren't things. Right from the beginning, I mentioned the fact that there is a transition, which is really a very good positive mark, from wanting food, water, basic necessities, to wanting what I would call sustainable empowerments by the community. That in itself is an advantage of the effect that we've had in such communities, because now you have people thinking from a broader context. And that can only happen because of the consistent engagements that we are having with the communities, right? Even though the engagements are not at the level at which we're currently calling for, right? Take, for example, the example he gave us, the Red Cross person. The thing is that it reflects when you go to a community and say, I'm here on behalf of this particular organization. They're unable to know that organization, but they're able to know the other organizations that they have interfaced with frequently, right? So there are things that are being done correctly. There are significant strides made in the empowerment of women, especially in the Northeast. I am maternally from the Northeast, and I know what it means to be a woman in that particular region. I know the disadvantages that you face. But then, in the number of years that I've worked in the Northeast, I've also seen how much of an impact aid actors have been able to have, especially in the psyche and the financial level or improvements of women in that region. You see consistently women becoming more and more empowered, more and more effective in taking power or taking decisions concerning their life and the lives of their children. So I can talk to the advantages from now till probably lunchtime, but I'm saying that it is not the call for advancements or more to be done is not really a shade to the fact that we aren't doing well. We're really doing so much. Even in terms of where we give the aid in a monthly basis or in a tokenistic approach, as I would say, it's still not that it is not effective or underappreciated or it's not a good thing. It's just that we can do more and we can do better in a way that it is sustainable for the community, such that the community is able to say, create songs about us, as yes mentioned. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm afraid we're running out of time. So I think I have to close it because the next, I don't know if there's another panel coming up, but we're supposed to have been finished for 5 minutes now. So I'll just say a big thank you to all the panelists, to you, Talatu, who joined us here in person, to you, Caroline, Suleiman, and Laila. This was really great. This was a very interesting discussion. Thank you for those who have joined us here. Thank you for those who joined us online, and enjoy the rest of the HNPW.